about big tech and the news industry. All media eyes were half a world away this week watching Australia pass a law that pushes Facebook and Google to pay big news publishers. Critics say the law mostly benefits incumbents like Rupert Murdoch, but the bill is a starting point for other countries to follow suit and demand that hugely profitable tech platforms pony up for news gathering. So is the United States next in line? Congressman David Cicilline joins me now. He's the chair of the House Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee. Congressman, should the United States adopt the same model as Australia?
Well, Brian, we have been looking at this issue, as you know, for some time. We just completed a 16-month bipartisan investigation of the large technology platforms. In the last Congress, we introduced legislation called the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act to get at exactly the same issue. And this is a real challenge. I mean, local news is on life support in this country. 2/3 of Americans get their news through Facebook and Google. Those two platforms control the digital advertising online. And so there are real challenges here. And we're seeing local newspapers close regularly, layoffs all throughout the industry, and a real decline in local journalism. And we've got to do something about it. And the reality is, this is not just kind of the sale of widgets. This is about access to trustworthy, reliable local news, which is central to our democracy. It's how you hold a power to account. It's how you expose corruption. So this is a real challenge. And we will be having a hearing in the Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee on March 12th on a set of proposals to save local journalism.
Is one of the proposals to have this bargaining code like Australia now has that forces Google and Facebook to pay up?
Well, actually, the legislation we introduced in the last Congress that I introduced, that I will reintroduce with the ranking member of the subcommittee in the coming weeks, does exactly that. It allows the publishers and online producers of content to band together for purposes of negotiating with the two large platforms so that there's a level playing field, so they have the ability to negotiate a number of areas that will ensure that local journalism is protected. So we're going to look at that proposal and a set of other ideas, but we have to take action because the monopoly power of these two platforms is resulting in a significant decline in local journalism because the business model is not working for local newspapers and online publishers, and we have to do something about it.
I think the question is, how big should big tech be allowed to get? And you all are looking at that from an antitrust point of view. But what is realistic? What can the government actually do with these companies?
Well, the good news is we studied this marketplace very carefully. As I said, for 16 months, we generated an almost 500-page report with a set of serious recommendations. Most of them are bipartisan, and I expect that we're going to move forward in the coming months with legislation that will ensure that there's real competition in the digital marketplace with things like interoperability and portability that will prevent companies from preferencing their own goods and services. And we're also going to look at some structural changes, separating out functions of marketplaces and people who sell goods and services. So everything is on the table. There's a lot of really good ideas and recommendations in our report. The days of self-regulation are over. These companies are monopolies, and we have to ensure that we restore competition in the digital marketplace. And the good news is, there's really strong bipartisan support to do most of the things that the report recommends, and those recommendations are about to be implemented by way of legislation.
And what's
in
the
the coming
timeline?
months.
What's the timeline here? A year from now, will Facebook be subsidizing news coverage in the U.S.? I mean, by the way, they already do contribute a lot, but will they be forced to do more?
The timeline is we're going to introduce legislation in the coming months. I hope the House will move quickly, then we'll send them to the Senate. They will propose really significant reforms that will bring competition back into the digital marketplace, that will prohibit these companies from using their market dominance to unfairly treat competitors, to block. They act as gatekeepers that prevent real competition, and the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act will allow the small publishers and newspapers to band together to have a level playing field for negotiations. All of this we're going to move forward in the House, and there's significant support in the Senate. And I think you'll see real reforms in this Congress.
Congressman Cicilline, thank you so much for being here. Thanks.
My pleasure.
A quick reminder, we cover all these stories